Survivor's ready. Go!
Travis spoken.
Boston Rob and Amber are gonna do it.
This is a business trip, as I like to say.
You Brad Culpepper.
I'm tired of you and the fucking chicken.
You can call me the puppet master. They can be my little puppets.
It's not like you're making me deal with the devil here.
You get to milk your own milk, I guess.
We got enough rocks here, too. We could build a pretty decent shelter just using rocks.
I'm supposed to talk loud.
Direct from Hobart, it's time for the only survival podcast in Australia dedicated to Survivor, bringing you the latest interviews, episodes, and opinions from the greatest reality show on the planet. It's Survivor Oz, and here's your host.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Survivor Oz, Australia's only Survivor podcast. To claim that they're the only Australian podcast that talks about Survivor. We are back for episode 4 of the reboot. The reboot continues, and this time on our weekly segment of What's Wrong with the Reboot. It's up about probably like 24 hours before the new episode, or 48 hours or something like that. I'm not sure when this will be going up, but we're getting there, alright? Calm down. Blame it on Ben. Well, you can't because he's off on an island doing secret things that we can't talk about. But, yeah. Speaking of not Ben, Colin, welcome back.
That's the name I go by in my everyday life, is not Ben. If people introduce themselves, I introduce myself back as, hi, I'm not Ben.
So, yeah, Colin's back. Probably going to be a recurring thing. This reboot is working out so well. I blame the reboot for all my issues in life, even outside of Survivor Oz.
If James Bond has taught us one thing, it's that reboots do not work.
Unless you got Daniel Craig.
Yeah.
Which Daniel Craig, I've heard a rumor he's up for maybe appearing in 1 or 2 Oztopsies later in the season, but we're just going to wait for that.
I thought he was going to replace one of the medevacs on Survivor. That got me excited for a second.
Oh, good segue. No, I think Daniel Craig is either going to show up on this or he may host one of the Ocelot shows. I'm not sure. But I would like to hear Daniel Craig's opinion on Survivor, though. Who would Daniel Craig's favourite be? Probably Jason.
I think it's Shirin. He's stuck on the oldies.
The oldies?
the old contestants from the golden age.
Moving on. We're here to talk about episode 4 of Survivor, entitled Dead People Are Everywhere.
The dead are alive.
Yeah, the dead are alive. Yeah, we've been recording James one. So, yeah, a lot of people nearly died. What did you think of it?
It's such an odd episode, because you can't really compare it to anything else you've ever seen on Survivor. I mean, I think half of the episode was really one event, or I guess the lead up to one event, and then the aftermath from one event. I counted 12 minutes before they even got to the opening titles, and they were already well into, the challenge and everything. And then the second half was such a given, but I mean, all things considered, considering they had this medevac, or potentially several medevacs to work around, this disastrous challenge, and then they had this given for who was going. I mean, the episode was edited in a way that it kept you in suspense the whole time. Not there was that much suspense about Alicia going, but it was suspenseful as to how it would happen. Would it happen right at Tribal Council? Would it happen during the challenge? Would it happen somewhere in between? Would she just walk off? Who knows? But yeah, it was handled in a way where I think this episode's going to stand out, and it's definitely not up there on like scooping in the fire as far as the drama goes and how epic that episode was, but it's definitely a step up from something like, Susan and her touchy feely gate, or whatever we want to call that. Richard Hatch grazing gate, I don't know. But
go on, Colin, that's a touchy subject.
Very touchy subject. Very feely subject. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those episodes. It's unlike anything you've seen on Survivor before. It's completely out of their own control, but I think they handled it really well on this, and I was very much glued to the TV the whole time.
I thought it was good. I was a little disappointed. There was no way around it, because this was a big moment they had to show, but it's so early on the season. I want to know these people. Like this, I think, has the record for least amount of confessionals ever in an episode, and that's understandable why, because of the freaking 20-minute dead people thing. But I'm not saying I wanted confessionals during that medivac. I'm just saying, like, we still don't know Julia or Liz or Nick or we didn't even get a final kind of thing from Caleb. I know he had a final speech, but
where was Liz in this episode? Come on.
Oh yeah, that was Julia. No, Michelle. Was it Michelle? Did I say that one? And even Aubrey and Joe and those kind of people. I want to know these people, and it was just like, another episode.
You want them to almost die. Like, come on, give us what we want.
Yeah, all the big characters almost died. They're hogging the screen time. Yeah, those camera whores, they did that on purpose. But yeah, I thought it was good though, and it was very weird pacing, especially with the second half of this episode. I will say, new segment, Noah gets angry at things. I am completely sick of the Survivor online fan base after this. I almost deleted any kind of Twitter or Reddit things I've got at the mind-numbing dumbness of some of the things I've seen. Like, these Survivor producers are so irresponsible for having this challenge. That's the worst thing. CBS should be ashamed of themselves. Disregarding the fact that we've had about 5 other digging in the sand challenges in the past, if not more. And then I've seen people trying to give the doctors advice on how they handled the situation wrong, and how the doctors weren't doing their jobs properly, and how Caleb could have died. And I've seen people criticising how Peter was not helping, and he's a doctor, so he should be in there helping. This is legitimate things that people have been saying. And we'll get to the whole bullying type thing. I don't want to. That's going to be a touchy, feely subject. But there's some dumb things that have spawned from that as well. So that's my rage of my bottled up feelings of the week. I've just seen some really dumb things said. So if I'm sorry if you're one of those people, but at the same time, that's dumb to say stuff like that. So let's talk about, before we get really into the whole Medivac stuff, let's just talk about the little short moments that we did get to see that weren't Alicia or the Medivac, which you would laugh at because it really was nothing. But on the Brains Tribe, we had a scene beforehand, which was Peter lying on the beach, and he was a bit upset after Liz got voted out. And a kind of interesting thing how I thought Debbie played that really well when she came up and she said, we did that on purpose. We wanted to keep you. It was no question. We wanted to get rid of Liz. I still want you on our side. I thought Debbie played that extremely well, in terms of trying to make him safe. Not that he was talking about, if there's a switch, I'm going to take them down one by one, but I do think that was good on her behalf. And then Debbie, once again, that confessional afterwards, after the challenge, about her children and everything, they're really setting Debbie up as this well-rounded character. I wrote it in my power rankings. Like, she's had the comedy moments, then she's been shown as the strategist. Now she's being shown as the human person. We're getting to know her. She's got emotions. She's playing for her children. If Debbie wins, I will not be surprised. I'm calling it right now. I'm not saying Debbie is the winner. That's not going to be my answer in the final questions. I'm saying if Debbie wins, it's no longer going to be a shock.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that is setting this whole season apart. We talked about it last week, that you're being fooled by how these characters are presented one week, and then you get something completely different. And I don't think that anybody would have expected Debbie episode 2 to be where Debbie is episode 4, and it is being handled less in like a crazy, loud, obnoxious older lady way. And now it's more, she's a power player, and it is realistic that she could win this. Not just you, but I mean, if you look at all of our power rankings this week, I mean, Debbie's right up there, with the exception of Jared. I don't know what he's watching, but Jared, there's a reason why you're always last. There's a reason why you're tied for first right now in the power rankings. But yeah, she's a unique character, and I think the only one that I can really compare it to is if you go back to Marquesas, you look at Kathy. The first 2 episodes, Kathy is completely different from episode 4, Kathy, and it's almost like 2 different characters. And I like that the show can do this, where they can fool us with somebody. And I wouldn't, as much as I agree with you that I wouldn't be surprised if she was the winner, I also wouldn't be surprised if she just crashes and burns in 2 weeks. She pulls like a Brad Culpepper or something and just completely bottoms out. But it really has you guessing, like, is she going to control this game? It's not unrealistic to think that, but it's just as realistic to imagine that she's going to completely fall flat on her face.
I do hope we get some of the more crazy Debbie back, though, because I do love that as well. But yeah, she's really, just her edit, she was one of the only people we actually heard from besides the Brawn tribe, and we had her at the beginning and during the middle of the episode.
Can I ask your opinion on Peter for a second?
Go for it.
Well, I'll just give my read of it, and you tell me if you agree with me or not. Peter comes back and he says, with a lot of confidence, which we're used to that with Peter, I'm going to, like you said, I'm going to dismantle this tribe one by one if there's a swap. I don't know if he really gets Survivor. If there's a swap, you can't do that unless they're all on your tribe. And if they're all on your tribe again, you're in the exact same position. And I just feel like Peter came across this week very confident, but he's really not learning his lesson from last week. The lesson to be learned would be like what we saw with Spencer in his seasons. If you realize you're on the bottom after being that cocky, take it and run with it and learn from it and work from the bottom up. Don't just be like, I'm going to take them all out with these impossible odds against you in a swap where you all end up in the same tribe. I didn't get that at all.
Yeah, I don't know if he has learnt his lesson, but do you think that line is Peter not learning his lesson, or do you think that line is foreshadowing for maybe he does take a lot of the brains out along the way? Because I can totally see Peter making the merge next week. If it's not the merge next week, if it is a swap next week, then I can totally see Peter making the merge. So do you think it's showing Peter hasn't learned his lesson, or is it foreshadowing?
I think it's probably going to end up being a bit of both. I think he most likely is going to end up as a player like Cass, who flips but maybe does it in the wrong way, and he doesn't learn his lesson, and he doesn't learn how to actually work people, so it's never going to work out for him in the end. So I would guess no matter what happens, he's going to go on some type of massacre against his former tribe mates. He'll take some of them out, but it'll never... I don't see him winning this game. I just don't see it as a possibility.
I don't think Peter will win either, but I also don't think we've seen the last of him. I don't think he's just going to fizzle out next week or something like that. I think he is going to be a major character or a player, at least even if he's only around for 3 or 4 more episodes.
He'll continue to avoid giving medical attention to those who are dying in challenges. He'll never learn.
You are the worst thing ever, Peter. How could you do that? You're a doctor. But I like Peter, though. I may be the only one in the Peter fan club. I think he's fun.
Oh, as a character,
so out
he
there.
is. Yeah, as a player, I have really no hope for him. But as a character,
but we said that for Debbie.
Yeah,
we said no hope for Debbie.
Yeah,
so,
well, I mean, at the same time, though, Debbie had one shot and she took advantage of it and it worked. And Peter had one shot and it failed, and he doesn't seem to learn his lesson.
That's true. Ooh, yeah, let's get into the Medivac situation. It pretty much dominated most of the episode. One of the most unique. It's up there with like Brandon's episode and stuff like that as unique Survivor episodes. But basically, they did the challenge. They're digging through the sand. It's very exhausting. You've got Scott telling Alicia to shut up. You've got all this stuff happening, and it's kind of a unique situation because I think most people expected this was going to be a mid-challenge type thing, but the challenge actually finished. Mm-hmm. Like, Brains won the challenge, then what was it, Beauty, and then Braun came in last, and after they finished, Debbie collapses, but alright, I'm alright, don't get the doctor, Joe. Debbie, I'm going to get the doctor, and she
Peter,
turned out alright. Yeah, come on, Peter, do your job. You're a disgrace to all doctors everywhere. And then she was alright, that was the one. And then next, after that, you've got suddenly Caleb is out. No, Sydney? Caleb. And then Sydney, no one's watching her, but then she's starting to fall over. She's out of it. Jason's there helping her. It was a crazy situation, no doubt. They've got Dr. Joe's in and Dr. Peter's not in. You've got crew members everywhere. You got Jeff Probst running around, 3 people down, or 2 people, you could say. Everyone in the game looks exhausted. Caleb is out of it, not even responding at times. Sydney's a bit better, but she looked pretty horrible at one point as well. It was a unique situation in Survivor, and Jeff Probst was... Did you not get the feeling that he was just loving every moment? Just the voice, like, all right, let's get everyone helping, and we're going to need a reflector, and we're going to use that to fan him down. You could just tell people are going to love this episode. I just felt Jeff Probst not have his executive producer hat on during all this.
Well, I mean, I think it was Mark Burnett's interview with Ben, and it might have been, I read it in a book somewhere, but I'm pretty sure it was Mark Burnett's interview with Ben where they talked about scooping in the fire and how him and Probst were sitting there eating lunch or something like that, and they got the call saying, there's been an accident at camp, somebody fell in the fire. And as much as they were concerned, they both had like this look on their faces, oh, okay, we just got a good episode here. You can't put it, like, you can't fault them for that. It's still a TV show, and they know that they have something dramatic, and they have to preserve it. And at the time this happened, nobody's life was at stake. And there was no reason to believe that even during the challenge, anybody's life was at stake. This was, if anything, this wasn't like a challenge like in Australia where, which one was it? Right before Probst gave them all the extra food where they just couldn't get through the challenge, like where it was clear to them there's something wrong here. This challenge played out normally, and it was along the lines of something like the Palau finale, where they probably just didn't anticipate it would take them that long. They run through these things over and over again. So it was all a surprise, but it is still a TV show, and until cable starts flatlining or whatever was that happened, there was no need to really worry about anybody's life being at stake. So yeah, you want to make this a good show. So it's definitely clear that he was playing a bit for the cameras, but that's his job too.
But that's, you completely hit the nail on the head, which is why some of these people were just so... I'm not even going to apologise. There are some dumb Survivor fans this week. It was just a challenge. Mm-hmm. Like, how are they to know? And it
was a challenge, like you said, that finished.
Yeah, exactly. And, like, people say, they should have checked the weather. What are they going to do? Completely just cut the challenge and then say, all right, you're going to do one of those self-challenges from One World. Like, it's just... I was angry reading things on the internet this week because it was just a challenge. No one predicted this would ever happen.
I'm just gonna pipe in here and say I've had the same effects that they had happen once, and it's not something you can see coming. There was how many years ago would this be? Probably almost 10 years ago. Our national holiday, Canada Day, July 1st. There's a barbecue I went to, and it was all the way across the city, so it's probably about an hour and a half.
That was one hot barbecue.
Well, yeah, the barbecue gave me heat exhaustion. No. But I basically rode my bike there. I didn't have a car or anything, so I rode my bike there, and it was a hot day, and I was fine, and I was out all day there outside, and then came home in the afternoon. It was still hot. It was about an hour and a half there, an hour and a half back, an hour and a half, or not an hour and a half, probably like 3 hours outside. And riding back, I didn't have enough water. I had no water at all, in fact. And I started to get really tired, and I started to feel kind of weak, but it wasn't until I got home and probably was sitting down or laying down for a good 15-20 minutes before everything hit me. So I think that's kind of the way this is that it's when your body has that chance to stop that it sort of just gives up. It's going on adrenaline before then. And it was like one of the scariest nights I ever had. I thought I probably passed out several times. It would have looked like sleeping, but I was shivering and dizzy. It was awful, but it's not something you know until you actually stop. So, and obviously it didn't happen to everybody, so you can't blame anybody for this.
Did Dr. Peter show up?
For me? Yeah. I called him and he was nowhere to be seen.
Not doing his job. How did he do that? But Jeff Probst was there. All right, we need a reflector.
Give me a reflector for calling here.
Jeff Probst feeds off people with heat exhaustion, but it was pretty insane. Caleb was down.
Scary.
Completely. He's still talking about your story.
Both.
Did anyone film that?
No, I was by myself. That's the thing. I think my brother came home like a couple hours later. But
that's Colin. He's just sleeping on the floor.
I was told, I'm exhausted. But it was probably about 12 hours before I felt like I could even get up again. It was pretty awful. But again, it doesn't hit you until you've had a chance to stop, which is exactly what we saw in this challenge. It was when the challenge was over. I mean, Sydney, it hit her, third, I think? So Debbie first, Caleb after that, and then Sydney just sitting in the bushes. That must have been at least 10 minutes later, and that's pretty much the way it goes.
And the fact that this has never happened in 32 seasons is just another strike off the list of the producers should not have done this challenge. It's dumb. Caleb down. It was scary, both Canada Day and this. He was totally out of it. Did you expect Caleb? Because we were kind of last week trying to guess, well, we have no clue who it could possibly... And it ended up being 3 people.
Yeah.
And knowing it was a medivac, were you thinking, oh no, Debbie's going, oh no, Sydney's going, oh no, Caleb? What were your just general thoughts on it?
Well, that's the thing. It's going to sound bad, but when it started and Debbie, everybody was expecting a medevac. And Survivor, again, just showing how this is not something you could ever plan for, to have 3 people go down after a challenge. Every audience member, when they saw Debbie, assumed Debbie at that moment was the medevac. It's never even going to occur to you that it could happen to more than one person. So I was worried that it was Debbie because she has been such a big character and she had control of the game. And this is where we might look bad, being like, oh, well, if somebody's going to, have serious effects from this and possibly die, I hope it's not Debbie. I hope somebody else dies. It's not that, but she's a character that you're familiar with. And then, when it happened to Caleb, I was wondering at that point, I was like, well, maybe it's not Debbie, maybe it's him. And then when it was Sydney, she was the other one where I was, I don't want to lose Sydney at this point. She's one of my favorites. It's no knock against Caleb. It's not saying, I'm glad it was him, but he's the character we've seen the least of and that's done the least in the game. That's probably what I was expecting going in, is it would have been somebody that we didn't see a lot of, and that's what ended up happening. But yeah, the entire situation of, is it Debbie, is it Caleb, you really had no clue who it was going to be. Or again, we've heard about how many medevacs there were. There was a possibility watching this even after Debbie was looking okay, and then you see Caleb down and Sydney down. It wasn't like I wasn't even assuming that Debbie was out of the woods yet. Who knows, maybe she was going to have another, bad moment and she collapses and all 3 of them are medevaced out. There was no way of knowing even during this challenge what was going to happen, which is what made this so interesting to watch.
Yeah, it does sound bad, but out of those 3, I would pick Caleb to go home next. Vote out or medevac. It was, I guess, a bit of a shock only because they kind of built up the Ty-Caleb relationship, and Caleb was arguably getting the most airtime out of the beauties besides Ty, although you could put Anna up there, but Caleb was getting a fair bit. So that was a bit of a shock. I'm not devastated, but it was a bit disappointing. I would have liked a bit more Caleb, because I think most people expected to hate Caleb, and most people, I'm pretty sure, ended up enjoying him. So it would have been good just one more funny scene before the challenge, or anything really. But yeah, did you like Caleb?
I didn't mind Caleb. Again, I had no impression of him from Big Brother because I didn't watch Big Brother. Whenever I do watch Big Brother, I watch maybe the first couple episodes and then I get sick of it and never watch again. I don't think I've finished a Big Brother season in years. But
You've never watched Big Brother after you got heat exhaustion and your Big Brother didn't help you.
That's right. It was over for me after that. Well, he was my little brother, so that's what made it even worse. Being the Big Brother down
close.
On Canada today.
You were the Big Brother and you let your little brother down.
Yeah, that's right.
With your heat exhaustion.
But no, I mean, I have to be honest. I think with every Big Brother season, I've watched at least the first few episodes or maybe the first 2-3 weeks, and then I get bored with it. I didn't even remember from that. I'm sure he was a bigger character later on, but I had no clue who he was. But just, I think I said this earlier on in the season, knowing that he was on Big Brother immediately is a strike against him for me, because those types of personalities I'm not a fan of. Even if it works in a Big Brother season, I don't see those types of people working on Survivor. But he was different from what I expected, and I think part of that just has to do with the fact that we didn't see a lot of him. His tribe as a whole we didn't see a lot of, but the whole relationship with Ty it showed that he was playing a good social game, and then the fact that Anna was approaching him and everybody was kind of going after Caleb as their swing vote, and he wasn't one of these guys who came right out of the gate and made any calls. From what we saw, he never made a decision on who he was siding with, the guys or the girls. And I think he was playing a decent game very early on. I'd compare him very much to Hayden. I mean, not just because they were on Big Brother, but they both played it a lot cooler early in the game than anybody expected them to, being Big Brother
A lot
players.
cooler, too soon, Colin.
Yeah, way too soon. But yeah, he's not something that I'm really... I think there are people out there who are big fans of Caleb just because of the little bit we did see of him. He was a nice guy, and that's not something we often get, especially on something like a beauty tribe. You wouldn't expect that. A lot of people assume that he'd be the douchey guy, and he wasn't. But for me, the thing that I'm more thrown off by is all the talk about him coming back, and I think that this is... A second chance season has just sort of made it where everybody's analyzing who's coming back. And the fact they included it on the end of the episode kind of bothered me a bit. Like, Caleb's ready to return or whatever the line was. And I'm thinking, even as a medevac, I don't know if he really stands out as big of a character as somebody like Russell Swan did or Michael Skupin. And the fact that they included it in there, it's almost the producer saying, we're bringing him back. And I don't know if him as a character is justified bringing back. So I don't know if I'm as big of a fan of him as some people are. I didn't hate him as much as I thought I would, but I'm not really dying for him to come back as a character.
Yeah, I didn't mind him, but I don't need to see him back. Like, I could probably name 50 one-time male players that I would rather see.
I'd say
above.
Of the people who are gone so far, I'd probably put him at the bottom of those that I would want to come back at this point. And that, in part, that's just because we never got to see him play the game. They never lost. So this isn't like a Bobby John Stephanie where they went forever and didn't get a chance, because this is a different situation where they perform so well that none of them are that interesting as players. Even Anna is not that interesting of a player yet because we haven't seen her do anything.
Yeah, there are way too many bigger characters I could bring back. They need Terry Deets back before Caleb. Mm-hmm. But if they do bring back Caleb, I'm not going to be upset about it.
Yeah.
But it was a bit... And Caleb wishes to return. It's kind of like when Jeff Probst asked Vetus at the reunion, Vetus, do you want to play again? Clearly setting up a Vetus return. Or even Malcolm, who had already filmed Caramoan, and he's saying, Malcolm, would you play again?
But at the same time, just mentioning, like, we don't get that often where there's mentions of people coming back. Jeff obviously had no love for Dan Foley, but he made a point to say in the reunion,
that's true.
This does not, mean that you couldn't come back. So we have ball drop there.
Dan Foley next season.
Dan Foley versus
Caleb. Yeah. It's going to be a good one. Well, Dan Foley on Big Brother, perhaps.
There's a guy who would fit in Big Brother.
So that was the medevac. We would go on. Like, it was a crazy situation for Survivor, kind of breaking the fourth wall with the cameras. We saw the return of He's Hurt Pretty Bad Terry. A lot was going on. Caleb is a medevac and out of the game, and Ty and everyone else is crying, and that's it. One thing I'm kind of putting on my tinfoil hat, during that medevac, and Jeff goes to Jason, what are you? Sydney is down, and potential for. I'm not saying this is what I believe wholeheartedly. It's tinfoil hat. Potential foreshadowing. Jason saying, "Sydney, she's one of us. I'm with her to the end." Final three of Jason and Sydney and someone else.
Well, yeah, I definitely have an opinion on that because I've found it kind of confusing the last couple of weeks. I feel like I'm watching a different show when I watch the Braun tribe versus what other people seem to respond to them with, because everybody seems to think that Jason and Scott are this duo, and maybe it's just because they are two guys and you see them maybe picking on Alicia more together, but I've seen from the beginning that Sydney's the one holding this thing together, and I think it's way more likely that Sydney and Jason are going to the end than Jason and Scott, or even Sydney and Scott. Even without that line, that's what I was thinking, and that line pretty much solidified it, that I think they're going to the end. And again, that could be foreshadowing that he stabs her in the back or she stabs him in the back, who knows. But either way, that was pretty much confirming what I thought the whole time, is that they are the real ones calling the shots, and that Scott's the one on the outside.
Jason has got such a big edit that I would not be surprised if he's in the final three and Sydney's there along, and that's kind of a moment they show back at the reunion clip show and stuff like that. Again, not saying it's happening for sure, because we just said Debbie might win, but it's definitely something that stood out for me. So shifting gears from the Medivac, the only other thing we saw was Braun. And I feel like I need to watch my mouth, because I know people are going to be complaining online about anything that I say here. It is kind of a touchy subject. But basically, people have been calling it the big bully situation, where Alicia was bullied by Jason and Scott. Again, I need to watch it, because I've got opinions. She was bullied. It was a form of, they were beating her down when she was just trying to. The one thing I can say is I don't think things are black and white, and I don't think things are ever black and white in Survivor, ever. I don't think there's a situation ever. Maybe there's a few things like, I can't even think of it. There would be a few things, but I don't think anything in Survivor 99% is black and white. So I don't condone what they did at all to Alicia. Like, don't get me wrong, not at all. I would never condone anyone to speak to anyone like that. But at the same time, I can kind of understand it, because Alicia was... You even saw Sydney. Sydney is the cool, calm, collector. She's the 3C. She was even saying in confessional, oh, here we go, Alicia is going... I nearly died. I'm trying to rest. Alicia is going on and on. She's starting arguments. And Scott even tried to explain it, like, you're good at that. I'm not sure if that was genuine or if he was just trying to cover his own ass. But he tried to explain, I didn't mean it like that. We were just exhausted, and she was going on. And it's kind of like a situation where we're seeing an underdog Alicia story, but it's kind of like Abby Maria. Like, they've got to live with her 24 hours a day, and we don't know what else is going on. Again, don't condone what they say. Don't go, oh, no, I think bullying's alright. No. But I've got plenty of things to say. You jump in here with some thoughts on this whole situation, which has been quite controversial over the past few days.
Well, I mean, I can see it from both sides, and I think that's where most people are missing the boat, is you do have to look at it from both sides. And it's just amazing to me that so many fans out there are so quick to be like, that challenge took its toll and the producers should have known it. Well, if the challenge took its toll physically on these people, why aren't we willing to believe that the challenge really took its toll emotionally on these people? And those that didn't collapse, like Jason and Scott and even Alicia, that explains their behavior, I think, to a certain extent, because everybody is okay to assume that if we get later in the season, well, these people have been around each other for a long time, they're malnourished, they're overheated, they're dehydrated, they're away from home. It's understandable that they'd say the wrong things sometimes. After a challenge like this, it's even more understandable, I think. And yeah, I agree with you that I think that Jason and Scott did maybe gang up on her a bit, but at the same time, I also see it from their point of view that when you watch this episode, it all depends on how you edit it. If you take out the second half of this scene, and it's left just with Alicia saying, I didn't like the way you guys treated me in there, and Scott says, which it was, he wasn't coming right out and apologizing, he wasn't coming right out and owning up, but a lot of people do that. I mean, he was kind of just, he was frustrated with her, and he was trying to present in the nicest way possible, and then she wouldn't drop it. So if they simply just let her keep talking and rambling, and they never said anything in return, suddenly this looks like Alicia is the one who just won't let it drop and she's picking on them. There's so many different ways you could view this, and we're only looking at this edited together. I think the second thing that does need to be looked at, you mentioned Abby Maria, and this is what I thought about. I know they talked about in the Ozlet show, comparing it to Shirin a little bit. You can look at people like Abby Maria, Shirin, Sugar is the one that came to mind in this episode for me. it's very easy to watch an episode like this, watch a bunch of people ganging up on somebody, only seeing the edited footage, and assume they're picked on. Because after Gabon, everybody loved Sugar, and she was so picked on. And then she came back a second time, and everybody had the exact same reaction to her. When you have that many people on 2 separate seasons who all say she's really tough to live with, suddenly the audience starts believing Sugar's maybe not what we thought the first time around. And I'm like the biggest Sugar fan that you'll ever find. But I can also...
I love candy.
Yeah, exactly. But you can understand after 2 seasons, even if you're a big fan of that person, yeah, there's probably something to it. And I think that's... You have to look at that with Alicia. Sydney is the thing that might sell this a little bit more from Scott and Jason's point of view. Not that the way that they went about it was right, but it also wasn't right the way that she went about it too. And you can just excuse these people because of the situation they're in and the challenge they just went through. But Sydney's the example. I mean, Alicia not only got along well with Sydney, but she wished her luck as she walked away. And yeah, Sydney has said a lot of things in confessionals that agree with Jason and Scott. She hasn't been as open about it, but she was still open in this episode. When they were saying, you know, is there even a question about who's going to go home? Sydney was right out, no. It's clear to everybody watching this show that Sydney was very vocal, even to Alicia, hey, you're going home. But yet Alicia still felt the need to say in the end, yeah, good luck to Sydney. I think that speaks a lot about how well Sydney is as a social player versus how Jason and Scott are. But that also shows that even if somebody like Sydney, who Alicia really liked, said she's very tough to live with, that Alicia probably is a tough person to live with. And I think if we saw her in a return season, as great of a character as she is, the opinion on her being bullied might change, because I have a feeling she'd come back and be a Sugar or be a Shirin, where the same thing would happen again. There'd be a lot of people saying, I just have trouble being around her.
Yeah, I always feel a bit uncomfortable even discussing and pointing fingers on a highly contrived, I guess you could say, or a highly condensed, edited TV show where they make heroes. They openly make heroes and villains. Like, that is their job. And again, you cannot excuse it, but what's to say they cut out the bit where Alicia called Jason a certain name, or Scott something or other. Like, again, I'm not now saying Alicia.
Raw footage of her using Dan Foley like type language.
Like, exactly. Like, but how do we know that Alicia didn't call Scott's mother a whore or something like that?
Yeah. Again, we're kind of playing devil's advocate on both sides here, and I think it's unfortunate that people who are siding with Jason and Scott are going to look at it and be like, oh, well, Alicia's terrible, and people who are siding with Alicia are going to be like, you shouldn't be defending Jason and Scott. We're not really defending anybody. We're just saying this is the situation, and it was everybody kind of losing their cool. I think as much as you say we're only seeing the condensed edit, you also have to look at what you didn't see. And this is one of the only times, if not the only time, where there was no camp life shown after they said you're going to Tribal. It jumped right to them at Tribal. And they would want to build suspense, especially since they invested in Alicia as an underdog. And we didn't see anything. If there was even one moment of life back at camp where Alicia was talking to Sydney and saying, hey, I think you should vote with me, and Sydney was even toying with the idea, or even to Alicia humoring her, saying, yeah, you know, how many episodes do we see that where it looks like somebody can flip the vote? And we realized in the end they were just humoring that person. They were going along with it so that they didn't have to call them out. If there was one moment of even Sydney saying, yeah, maybe I'll go with you, Alicia, just to humor her, they would include that in the episode and edit it in that way. That means they got back to camp, and even Sydney, who was nice to Alicia, who Alicia liked in the end, made it clear, you're going home. Now you have to look at that and say, it can't just be Jason and Scott are a bunch of jerks. It's also, Alicia is clearly not the person that anybody wanted to be on the tribe with. And that's nothing against her. I love her as a character, but this is a lot of people who are saying the same thing, not just Jason and Scott.
It's kind of similar to Sierra from Tokensheens, where we saw almost nothing of Sierra being annoying, but everyone wanted her gone. And that can't just be them being assholes. It must be something. Again, their comments were really bad, what they were saying. But again, like, Sierra was the underdog, and everyone was supposed to feel bad for her. But there must have been a reason why she was there. They kind of just picked the random girl oh, I hate that girl because she has a stripy top. Like, there must be something in there. And I do think there is something with the exhaustion. I know Will Sims busting out doesn't blame the exhaustion because, like, as he said, everyone was in that situation. But I wholeheartedly think he would not act like that in real life.
Yeah.
I truly believe that was a product of the actual show, and Will would never do that if he went out to lunch with the Dirty 30 and someone's accusing him of hoarding extra fries or something like that. I don't think Will was going to lash out like that. So it's just a sticky situation. I choose not to take an actual stance on any. Like, I hate it when people. Like, they tweet at the people, be it Will Sims or Jason or Scott, and you're the worst person in the world and stuff like that.
Just to fans out there, why do fans think that seeing 42 minutes of an episode makes you more of an expert than the people who live the situation?
Yeah, it's just... Look, I love Survivor and I love talking with fans, but sometimes I see some ridiculous things that just make me think I wish social media wasn't a thing. It's just, why would you tweet a Survivor saying you're the worst person in the world? I think people even tweeted, this isn't even a joke to go with the recurring joke of the episode, I think people tweeted Peter saying, shame on you for not being a doctor during that moment. I actually think that happened. So yeah, I try not to take a stance. It was bad, but there is just so many factors, and I know there are going to be people, if we actually have any listeners, who say, oh my god, I can't believe you said that, you're defending this, and all that, because people like to jump on drama, and they like to just twist things, when I am not defending anything from anyone's side. I'm just saying people come to conclusions so easily, and Jeff Probst even built it up. This was built as a bullying storyline. He was tweeting, use this as an example to your kids to not act like this. And Jeff Probst is obsessed with the children. Like, this was clearly a storyline that they were wanting to build. It's just, there are too many factors out there.
Also, like, we only see so much, and clearly this is an example where, from what we saw, you had two guys who were teaming up on her. But also look at the way it started, where he was it wasn't really a sincere apology, but I think under the circumstances, I don't know if he really needed to make this amazing sincere apology. You had several people talking on this episode about how she was going on, and we don't know how long. We're seeing it over the course of a few minutes, so it looks like they're getting up her. But if we were, and again, this isn't defending or anything, but it's saying we don't know. If we were to find out later on that it was 6 hours later, and we see 6 hours of raw footage, and she's going on for 6 hours, and for half of that, they're like, okay, we get it, anybody's going to lose it after a certain amount of time. And at the same time, on the flip side of it, when she's trying to encourage people in a challenge, and she gets Scott saying, I was trying to be encouraging, and he clearly wasn't, but he was making his attempt to just let it go, to let this situation drop. Maybe he could have actually said something a little bit more sincere. If there was one moment in there where he did say, you know what, you're right, I'm sorry. That, I think, just moving on really quickly on Jason and Scott, because this is, I think, where I'll get a little bit more critical of them. I don't really think they're playing the type of game where, I don't think it's just Alicia. I don't think these are the type of guys who are going to be able to win jury votes. They'd be very comfortable around, people like, I'm about to say Boston Rob, not Boston, Philip Shepard. They'd be very comfortable around people like Philip Shepard or Brad Culpepper, these big, strong, macho guys who don't really feel bad about the things they do or say. John Rocker or whatever, they're not quite at those levels, but they also haven't shown us, whether it's Alicia or anybody else, that they're going to play a good social game, that they're going to try to win votes. They didn't need to win Alicia's vote, but going into the jury, I'm not really seeing that they have the ability to do that either.
Yeah, I think, again, edited down show, but I do think this is representative of how they may act later on in terms of maybe just speaking without thinking, even if it's not bullying, air quotes, even if it's just saying something they're not supposed to really be saying, I feel like it could come back to haunt them.
Like if Scott makes another mistake, as little as it was, it's not a big deal what he said to her during the challenge, but if he makes another mistake like that to somebody else and they come to him and say, you know what, like, I don't like the way you did that, and he just says, I wasn't actually saying something bad, I was saying something good. You know, it sounds really lame. It's his attempt at an apology, but it shows that he probably won't be able to really apologize if he does something wrong in the future. Even if he doesn't believe it, he won't be able to do that. Just if he's in a jury and somebody's confronting him like that, he has to give something better than that.
Yeah. Just to kind of close out this discussion, one thing, not even this scene, I'm talking about every time something happens, one thing I don't get about Survivor, again, and the fans, this is really the hate on the fans episode. I'm a fan too, I don't know why I'm talking like this, but, like, situations like this happen and they're bad, but so many situations like this has happened in Survivor's past. And I'm not talking about this scenario, I'm talking about any time there's a controversial moment. 99% of the time there's a season when stuff like this has happened before. Well, and I don't understand why there's suddenly outrages for certain things.
I mentioned the comparison with Debbie and Kathy from Marquesas, but you even look at the same thing with Kathy and Marquesas when she came to the tribe and, you know, said something and they all jumped down her throat and she was crying. If this is modern day Survivor, everybody's like, she's being bullied, she's being bullied. That's not what it was at all. They had a hard time dealing with her early in the game, and they eventually learned how to deal with her later on, and they loved her. I mean, in the end, it was said, you know, Tammy said, if this were a real vote and Kathy were in the finals, she would win this thing hands down. If you're looking back at episodes, 1 through 4 of Marquesas, Kathy is the character like Alicia. Kathy is the one where nobody gets her, and she's crying because, they didn't like the way they treated me, everybody's ganging up on me. It's early in the game. These people don't know how to deal with each other just yet. And yeah, it's happened so many times as early as that.
I could be making this up, but isn't there a scene in China where James is talking to PG and he's, shut your mouth?
Oh, he did that constantly, yeah. In every season. Look at the way he was in Heroes vs. Villains to Stephanie, yeah.
But Stephanie is the annoying one, and PG is the annoying one.
And there's another one. I'm kind of just... And again, I'm not defending. I'm saying there's a possibility that Alicia is one of these characters. Because again, fans were so willing to believe, Stephanie was robbed in Palau, and then they saw the way that she was in Guatemala, and then they saw the way that people responded to her in Heroes vs. Villains, and then you start to get that maybe she's not one of these people who is easy to get along with. And like I said, Sugar, you said Sierra, Shirin, we saw a bit of that. There are tons of these characters that it's easy on the surface to say after a couple episodes, they're the underdog, they were picked on. But the more you see of them, then you realize there might be something to it. And I'm simply saying there's a possibility that Alicia's one of those people, especially considering Sydney had such a hard time with her as well.
And this is opening a whole other can of worms that we don't want to get too much into. But I totally think it's a gender thing as well going on here. That stuff like when Naonka whacked over Purple Kelly. Mm-hmm. Not Purple Kelly, sorry. Well, that happened too, we just didn't see it.
Yeah.
Kelly B.
Yeah.
If Kelly B had 2 real legs, I don't think that would have been a thing. Mm-hmm. But then they painted, she's got 1 leg. This is the worst thing that's ever happened in mankind. If this is a guy here, I'm not sure they make a big fuss.
Yeah.
Fans or at the edit.
Well, yeah, and let's be honest. I think we have to... If people really want this to be like equality and everything, we have to start treating people as if they are equals. And the one thing I'm going to disagree with, I wasn't in the Ozlet episode, but the one thing I'm going to disagree that they got into in that was just how menacing it was. You have this 7-foot tall guy towering over Alicia, and that has a lot to do with how the audience is perceiving it, to be honest. Is that you have somebody like Alicia who's this smaller, portrayed as weaker on the tribe. Basically, if you look at Survivor, the nice-looking young girls, if anybody who is any more aggressive than them, stronger than them, taller than them, then that's a bullying situation. as an audience, you have to look at it and say, well, are you even giving them equal credit? Because let's be honest, Alicia held her own against these guys. There's a reason why we're talking about how, maybe Jason and Scott just lost it after a long time, because she was going on for a long time. She held her own, whether she was in the right or she was in the wrong. She held her own against them. We don't need to look at this as a bullying situation. She wasn't at some disadvantage against these guys. She's probably more aggressive than them.
She's not playing the victim still to this day on Twitter. She's talking up like, yeah, I'm proud of myself and all this stuff.
So is it a bullying situation? I mean, it's the way the audience perceives these situations, and the audience, I think, also needs to look at it and say, are we taking these smaller, nice-looking young girls and not valuing what they're bringing enough, where we think that they're bullied where other people aren't? Because if this was Caleb and they were all talking to him, Scott is still huge compared to Caleb. Jason is still a huge, strong guy compared to Caleb. If they were talking to Caleb this way, we're not necessarily looking at it as bullying, and Caleb probably wouldn't be standing up for himself as much as Alicia was. Alicia was holding her own in an argument here, and I think that's what this really is about.
Yeah, so I guess, I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, but to summarize, we don't condone what Jason and Scott said, because they said some mean things, but and I'm not calling Survivor fans dumb, I just think sometimes very narrow-minded, and you just need to look at a situation and think of all the different factors like we're doing right now. We've probably had a 20-minute conversation on it, rather than jumping up and saying this or tweeting people and all this stuff.
And not to speak for you, but I mean, I think we'd both be in agreement, and if anybody really rewatched this episode, you're going to see that Alicia's the one in this argument who comes out probably being stronger and holding her own more, despite the fact that she's voted out. Just because she's voted out, that's, I think, what people are looking at and saying she's a victim. She was going to be voted out regardless. In the argument part, she probably was stronger than them, and that doesn't make her a victim at all. That means she stood up for herself. Whether right or wrong, she held her own.
Yeah, so that's that, and no doubt if people listen to this before the next one, we're going to have people complaining and saying that we condone this or whatever, and that will exactly prove my point of people who just jump the gun and post things without even just thinking things through. So it was an unfortunate situation, and I hate when stuff like this happens on Survivor. I don't like Survivor for this thing. I like it for funny moments, cool characters, interesting characters, and strategies. I don't like it for drama or fighting, so it wasn't something I was particularly well, I don't think anyone was happy about it, but it's not something that I'm very much a fan of.
Do you, not to draw this out, but I'm looking at this differently than most people are, and maybe that is because Alicia really did hold her own in this, and I'd never looked at it as a bullying situation. I looked at it as two people fighting versus one, although it was technically three, just Sydney kept her mouth quiet. But this isn't really at a level of what we saw in most of Worlds Apart, almost every episode of Worlds Apart, or All Stars with Richard and Susan or anything, or Big Tom and Susan or whatever it is. I don't really see this as being as heavy of an argument as those where it makes it that difficult to watch. It is more just the fans' reaction to this where I think it's being blown up more than it should. Because like you said, Alicia isn't looking at this saying, I was bullied.
Yeah, I guess, and again, I don't want to go back down the gender rabbit hole, but what about when Lindsay said to Mike, "Oh, it's your god who came and did this.
Yeah.
Your god is making firewood." That was a personal attack, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. And what about Kimmy versus Alicia? How do you read that situation? Mm-hmm. So I do think there is part of it that people just automatically read, "Oh, that's the tallest man in the world," and
if
this
Ty
is the
were
bounty
saying
hunter.
these things to Alicia, would people take offense to it?
Am I really cruel in saying that I want to see that scene? Yeah, so it's interesting, all the different factors. Again, I've summarised it. We don't think what they did was necessarily right. There's a lot to talk through. And to kind of break up from that, I have done a bit of scrolling through Twitter, and I found some interesting Peter reactions here. Patty Sloan at Sloan Flynn says, Jeff Probst, where was the ER doctor, air quotes, player in all this? Seems his training should have kicked in. Hashtag Survivor. 10 favourites, 1 retweet. Peter Bagginstoss replies to Sloane Flynn, yeah, let me win a challenge, and then doctor a player, and then die. Sounds like a plan. Smiley face. And then Sloane Flynn replies, understood, but didn't see you offering comfort to downed team members as others. Could be TV editing effect, but... And then he replies, really? You conclude so much with 20 seconds of Brain's background footage? Wow. Unbelievable.
I want to see Peter in an argument with somebody.
Oh, wait, he replies again. Oh, no, this one's not very fun. I'll admit when I'm wrong, I was wrong. Sorry, Doctor. Oh, no worries.
See, Peter won.
Yeah. Well, at least, Peter in an argument would just be like, well, you want me to do this and this and this and then die?
That's how he's going to end every argument. It doesn't even matter what it is. Like, somebody's like, his wife's like, did you take out the trash this morning? Oh, so I'm supposed to take out the trash and then come back inside and then die?
Die? He makes a good point, though. If others are going down from heat exhaustion from working too much, he's just done the challenge like them, too.
Well, yeah, and we don't know how... Just because he wasn't one of the 3 that needed medical attention, that doesn't mean the rest of these people are capable of...
Yes, some of them looked like they'd aged 20 years sitting around on that beach. Like, there's that scene of Neil holding the umbrella and Aubrey's under there and... someone else, Debbie or Joe or something, and they all just look like they're about to collapse.
People don't even know this, but Joe is actually a 44-year-old man. We just have this challenge took its toll on him.
Yeah. So there's our Raging at the World episode. So in the end, Alicia is voted out. What a surprise. One kind of, you alluded to this, I was looking at the clock and I legitimately thought no one would be voted out. I thought it was going to be a case of they're going to get to the 40 minutes and then Jeff Probst is going to say, all right, we're switching tribes. And then it would be like to be continued or something. Because I'm like, there's no way they can fit a challenge and a tribal council in 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. They did the challenge, Braun loses, and then they're all saying, let's just go to tribal council now. And I was annoyed. I was about to rage, like, no, they can't do that. That's just not fair, because Alicia should have time to do some scheming or find an idol or this or that. I was getting very angry that they were about to vote her out, because it wouldn't feel right. It felt like they were doing it just because it was a rushed episode more than anything. So I was about to get angry, but then they didn't do that. I'm glad Alicia stood her ground and said, no, I want to get voted out at tribal council. And then
let's also look at that, like I said earlier, about how if there was anything to show, they would have shown it. And don't look at this from Scott and Jason versus Alicia. Look at this as Sydney versus Alicia, even. Let's look at this from Probst's point of view. He has never actually offered, well, let's just do tribal council right now, other than Palau, where they had to. There was no other option. For him to say that means that even going into this, they knew it was so clear Alicia was going, they didn't even feel the need to waste the time and go back to camp. So even the crew must have known that Alicia was such a given to vote out. It's not just the whole situation with Scott and Jason against her.
I would have been annoyed if they did that on the beach, though, just because it's breaking formalities for no other reason other than someone is about... Like, Dan Barry never got voted out just straight away on that beach, but we all knew he was going home. So, yeah, but then they went to tribal council. It was a very short one, and Jeff said, I'm going to be honest, I think you're going home, Alicia.
Which, again, have we ever seen Probst say something like that? This really speaks to where Alicia's position was.
Yeah, there was no doubt, but what I liked is I'm glad that this happened on the Medivac episode, because imagine a 40-minute episode of trying to mask Alicia. They would... Oh, but Scott's a millionaire, so we might get rid of him. And there's no way they could have went around it, so it was the perfect time for Alicia to go home, I think. So maybe just final thoughts on Alicia. She has the biggest fan base out of anyone this season, I think. It's crazy. I like Alicia. I don't love Alicia. And they're talking about analysing every single person. They're talking about Alicia coming back. Everyone's saying, oh, that's a given, she'll return. I do like her. I thought she was a fun character. I liked her enthusiasm. I think she had a lot of memorable scenes. But overall, I wouldn't have been upset if she was the first boot. I liked Darnell, and I would have liked Jenny to stay for the second boot. So yeah, she was a fun character, but she was just a small minor character. Think in 10 weeks' time when we're at the final, she's going to be an afterthought. So yeah, I liked her. I don't know if I joined the club that every single other person seemed to be in.
No, I think that she's an amazing character, and I talked about this. I don't remember if it was on this Oztopsy or the Ozlet show or whatever, but I compared her to Abby Maria just in that you need these characters who are very clueless in the game, and I think they make the game interesting. And I wish that we could have seen more of her, just because it would have been hilarious to see what happens in Emerge with her flipping her vote just because she doesn't know what's going on and that affecting people. I want to see more chaos in the game from people who don't really know what they're doing. I probably am a bigger Alicia fan than you are, just because I think she was a blast to watch on this season. But I'm also, where you love these first boots, my thing is I love these people who crash and burn 3 or 4 episodes in. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Silas Gaither. There's something about a person who is just so bad at Survivor and just so gloriously ridiculous in the game that endears them to me. So for that reason, I like Alicia. So if anybody's listening to this thinking, oh, well, I don't like Alicia, it's actually the opposite. The fact that I think she is such a probably hard person to deal with and clueless in the game, that's what I think makes her a more interesting character. I would love to see her back on a future season. I just don't hold out any hope that she would be good at the game. And I hold to the opinion that if she comes back a second time, she'll be a Sugar or she'll be an Abby Maria, where I think it'll probably lessen her reputation. Well, I don't know if Abby Maria's reputation was lessened, but yeah, Sierra or Shirin or Sugar, where I think that opinions on her will change if she ever comes back. So for that reason, I'd like her to just be a one-player season, but I did enjoy her on the season enough that I would like to see her back.
It's kind of like Caleb. If she gets brought back, I'm not going to complain. Like, she was a fun character. Mm-hmm. But it's, again, like Caleb, I just think there are easily 10 women, like one-timers, that I'd love to see again, if not 50 that I could name over Alicia. So it would be interesting, but I'm not really hoping for it. Kind of like a Jatia thing. Yeah, Jatia had a great 4-episode arc, but do we really need to see Jatia again?
It's more, I think, yes. Is her 4-episode arc going to be better a second time around? Probably not. So in that sense, let's leave it.
I think, yeah, again, we don't have to bring back everyone. But again, if she does get brought back, more power to her. I'll be enjoying it, because she definitely brought some entertainment to this season. And it will be interesting to see if the next episode will be lacking because of her, but not being. I think it won't, but it will be interesting to see what happens. Speaking of next week, what is going to happen next week?
Drop your buffs. Yeah, like you said, it could be a merge. It could be a tribe swap. I would, if I had my choice, I would actually rather they play it out one more week, just with challenges with the tribes we have. Yes, it'd be really
and
great.
Then merge at 12.
Yeah, I would rather they merge a little bit further down, like one more episode. But if I had my choice between the two, I would rather it be a merge now, just because then we would have a season where we have the 3 tribes go all the way. And there's no sense in tribe swapping right before a merge. I'm not as critical on it as some people are. I actually liked it when they did in Gabon. I liked it when they did in All Stars, but I think this time I just want to see these dynamics play out, and we're at the point where nobody's going to go into the majority, so it would be interesting to see what happens if they merge.
I just think it's way too early, because we don't even know half of these people yet. Tribe swap, uneven numbers, so I don't know what they will do there, if they will just do 7-6 or what. I just think it's too early for a merge. But I think, again, we're at 13. Play it out one more week, episode 5. Because, think about it, Brains, yeah, it's probably going to be Peter, but there's still an idol to be found at Brains, so that's a possibility. Plus, it started as Liz, Aubrey, Neil, and Peter, and that flipped. So what's to say it wouldn't flip again and they vote out Neil or something? Braun, it's probably going to be Sydney, but then maybe she'll rally with Jason like you were talking about, and they'll get rid of Scott. Like, there's still at least a little bit of possibility. And then Beauty, they're going to be fractured with Caleb gone, so the dynamics there would be interesting, and it would be a question of, are the girls going to go with Nick, or are they going to go with Ty? So there would be at least a bit of drama there. And then would Ty play his idol, and does he really need to?
Well, that's an interesting scenario that, like, let's imagine that, because the girls do have the majority if they were to go into it, they would probably just vote one or the other. I don't think there's any way they even assume Ty has an idol at this point. Nobody's really going to suspect Ty has an idol. It would be great if they voted for Ty and then he played an idol, and one of them went home just because they didn't think... Yeah, one of them just because they didn't think it was a possibility he could have an idol, because who would think that?
Plus, with Caleb gone, there's more of a chance that the Beauty Tribe will lose, because he was their powerhouse. So there is a lot of dynamics. Like, yeah, on the flip side, there's a total possibility that episode 5 could be complete junk and one of the most predictable, boring ones ever. But there is still a lot for one more week before we go to the Emerge. But obviously that's not happening, so let's not dwell on it too much. Let's quickly get to some of these ending things. Who's going to win?
I want to say Debbie and I want to say Sydney, but I'm going to say Anna just because she has probably the most power at this point.
I'll just say Debbie because that would be awesome. Dark horse to win.
This one I'll go with both Debbie and Sydney because I would love to see either of them win, and I think that they could pull it off.
I'll go with Anna for this one. What are some of the other questions? Yes, I'm being very good at
Which tribe would you be on for the second week in a row?
Which tribe would you be on?
I didn't hear your answer. Which one would you be on?
Beauty.
It's pretty much a given, isn't it?
Yeah, now that I think about it. And who this week played like you would play?
Nobody really played this week, so...
Yeah, well, I say to answer for you, Caleb.
Yeah, I was going to say Caleb, because I've been there.
Or maybe Sydney, because you at least survived.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't need the help of my little brother or Dr. Peter.
Yeah, you didn't get Dr. Peter or evacuated by a helicopter or have a reflector fanned onto you.
I stuck it out on my own, and I lived to tell the tale.
Yeah, so maybe Debbie or Peter. Or
Debbie or Peter. Yeah, I'd be the one refusing medical attention to people.
Yeah, I would be. I played like Peter this week because I refused to give anyone any medical attention. What a dick! How could he do that? Again, sarcasm. For me, it would be Alicia because I would suck. Or maybe it would be Sydney, where people would be fighting and I'd just be in the back, oh, this girl is so annoying, get her out of here.
Just don't say anything, you'll look bad on TV.
Yeah.
You don't want to be the bully, keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, that would be me, just sleeping in the background. So that's that for another week. I'll do the ranking things eventually when we get them. We have to do what we rank. We had our predictions. I'll get them off Ben eventually.
I'm pretty sure both you and I predicted Alicia would be the fourth boot, so points.
Yeah, that's right. 2 points for each of us. And Ben said she would win, so -4 points. Yeah, when Ben gets back from his trip, I'll call it a trip, I'll get his predictions. But it's kind of hard to contact him at the moment, though, so... Look, I'm not saying anything, but draw your own conclusions from that. Yeah, next week we'll come hopefully a bit earlier, maybe live.
Maybe.
I don't know, Catherine, if you beg hard enough. But yeah, we'll get back to you on that. But it will be earlier, I can almost guarantee that. So, Colin, thanks for not being Ben again.
I'm thankful for that every day myself.
And hopefully you recover from your heat exhaustion. You didn't say when this was. This could have been last week.
Well, I think it was within the last 9 years ago, maybe.
Oh, so recent.
Yeah, recent. It's taken me this long.
So yeah, all the best.
But you know what? I am ready to play Survivor again. If anybody's wondering.
Oh yes, Colin had heat stroke, and he will ride his bicycle again. Some of these, you need to do a remix of you being here. Like you just have a floating bobblehead of you over Caleb or something.
With the song "I Want to Ride My Bicycle" by Queen playing
Yeah.
in the background.
Alright, that's it. Leave a comment, because we read them. Come on, Catherine, you're not live, so you gotta put 10 comments in there, and Zachary Chong and all the other regulars. And Peter, if you're listening, go out and help someone. Use your expertise. How could you not do that? And until next time, we'll speak to you next time. That didn't make sense. On the train! Choo, 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 choo.
My bicycle.